welcome to Human Ascension with Ellie. This week on the Ellie Dreams Down Under channel, I did an analysis of the astrological phenomenon that's taking place, which is Pluto entering Aquarius. This is something that has not happened for 200 years, and so it's kind of a big deal in astrology circles. Pluto has entered into Aquarius. It did this on the 19th or the 20th of November, depending on where in the hemisphere you live, or whether it's the north or south hemisphere that you live in. And it's going to stay in Aquarius for 20 years. I did a two-part series, which I've decided to merge together and create and turn into an episode of this show so that my wider base of listeners can also get this information. So in part one, I do kind of a recap of what Pluto and Aquarius could potentially mean. And also I add two other astrological phenomena that are taking place, one in 2025 and one in 2026. And you might notice that part of the discussion refers also to other predictions or phenomenon that have taken place in the past that might actually coincide with this planetary lineup. For example, predictions made by the Lady in White to Chris Bledsoe, just to name a few. And so I thought I would add this and then come back and have a little chat with you and then show you what my tarot reading also brought up to see whether or not the two different types of the two different approaches, whether it be the astrological approach or the tarot approach, whether or not they provide similar information about this phenomenon. So let's take a look at the astrological explanations. I want to read you something that I actually think is really, really cute. I'm not going to show you which book it's in because I don't want to embarrass the author. But I will tell you that this is a verbatim readout of what it says here. Pluto, I was looking at Pluto and Aquarius, and I've got a variety of different resources, but I love this. This really tickled me. It's talking about the way that Pluto affects the various different signs as it travels through the signs. And it says here, due to the long orbit making these placements irrelevant, Pluto in Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Aquarius, and Pisces is not included in this book. The book's author thought that it's something that's not going to happen, and therefore there's no point talking about it. And then guess what? For the first time in 200 years, Pluto is in Aquarius. It entered Aquarius, I think, on the 19th or 20th of November, depending on which hemisphere you live in. And it's going to be here for the first time in 200 years, and it's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. Now, I've got a few notes here about what the impact of that is likely to be, but there are also two other things that are taking place later on in 2025 and 26. And so I want to remember those as well, because that is something that we might find particularly interesting. So there are quite a few things that the Pluto in Aquarius energies are likely to bring to the surface on a major scale, because it's such a long orbiting planet that when it does enter into Aquarius, the impact is likely to be significant. The first one is the potential for increased conflict. For example, the power shift between nations might change. I've been talking about how the China, for example, is gaining in relevance across the world. China's GDP is growing at a rate that's nearly double that of the United States. I think that the United States GDP at the moment is around 20 trillion. And it's gone up from around about, 14 or something trillion in the past few years. China's GDP has gone from around 2 trillion to 14 trillion in the same period of time. And so it's at a much more rapid percentage. That is something that could be influenced by this Pluto and Aquarius energy. There's also the issue in this planetary lineup of there being changing alliances among different nations. There's a push for authoritarianism across the world. Those authoritarian leaders are kind of banding together to be able to justify themselves and build alliances. That's evidence that we're seeing right now. And just the issue of the rise of authoritarianism is also one of the signs of this as well, because of the fact that the energy at the moment with Pluto moving into Aquarius in particular is that there's kind of a power struggle taking place and everyone's trying to grab what they can. Other things here, the US sudden change in support for Ukraine. Joe Biden and the White House or the presidential administration have actually changed their stance slightly by allowing Ukraine to use American long-range weapons to actually attack Russia on its own soil and take some of Russia's territory, which has been taking place very recently, rather than simply defending itself. This is an escalation and also a change in the power dynamic, which could be part of the energy. Iran also has sort of cozied up to Russia. There's a quid pro quo element taking place with Russia and Iran sharing information, sharing technology and weaponry. There's also likely to be an increase in things like espionage between nations. And this is all about hoarding information and gaining as much power as possible. But another thing when it comes to this increased conflict element that comes out of the planetary lineup is that it also could relate to there being an increase in revolt against authority. So there could be more in the way of protesting or riots or conflict, and also this nationalistic type of conflict as well, or the conflict of the common man, which I know that, you call it populism, but populism, I think, has been distorted. But, we could call it populism. So populism uprisings and things like that. So this increased conflict is one of the signs of this planetary lineup. The next one is about shifts in technology, in particular, probably artificial intelligence, but there being massive information shifts taking place and lots of new information circling around, which then allows for some people to gain access to a greater amount of information. There's also new discoveries that take place, which may be discoveries of information. When I think about new discoveries of information, there is a possibility that it can be discoveries of old information. I'm currently looking at all of the secret gospels that were discovered in the mid-20th century. And I wonder whether there's more or whether there's sections. I mean, I was so disappointed, for example, when I was doing my episode on the Gospel of Mary, to discover that the first 6 pages are missing and then there's 5 or 6 pages missing in the middle, because it's such an interesting gospel that it would be nice to have every word and be able to see what happened in the beginning, what was it that happened in those first 6 pages. It could be that another example of that same gospel is found, or more gospels are found, or more ancient writings are found. It could even be that a new civilization is found, something that was never expected to exist, or a new species of animal or something like that are being discovered, because there's something. When Pluto moves into Aquarius, there's a possibility of there being so much information shifting that it includes new information that's being discovered. There's also the influence of entities, particularly powerful entities such as governments and world powers, to be able to manipulate technology in order to abuse that technology to gain benefit in some way, to be able to benefit from increased power and control. It can be an abuse of technology, an abuse of science. Think, for example, of that cloning debate. Is it appropriate to clone a human being or any other kind of species of animal? And what are the ethical implications of that? Well, it could be that there's a lowering of the boundaries when it comes to that, or there could be secret activity, or even just overt activity of wanting to manipulate technology and science to be able to gather as much power as possible for that entity or that nation itself. And a lot of that could be done covertly as well. There's also likely to be in this energy attempts by powerful entities to suppress information. And the reason for that is because there's so much new information that comes out of this energy that it can be scary for the status quo. And so the first instinct, often by governments that want to keep things just the way they are, thanks very much, they want to keep the hierarchy as it is, they want to maintain control, particularly of the people, is to begin to suppress the people. So there might be increase in authoritarian activities across countries. Governments may end up flipping into something that's more of an authoritarian mindset, and there could be control, whether it be a manipulation of information, suppression of information, overt or covert control of the people in some way. And the burning of books, for example, is a very small scale kind of example of that. This could end up being corralling all the information that's available and centralizing it. So, for example, putting boundaries on social media so that everything has to be state-run or everything has to be state-regulated, that kind of thing. Or getting rid of all of the news forums other than those that are talking points for the state, that kind of thing. And also the possibility of there being hidden information, like I had mentioned earlier about there being an overt operation relating to science or technology, not overt, covert operation that's hidden away and may be presented as being something that is wholesome and positive and don't worry, this is for the greater good. But in fact, it's sinister behind the face of it, but they're not expressing it honestly and that kind of thing. So increases in disinformation as well. And what I also found was really interesting when I was researching into Pluto and Aquarius is that there may also be a blurring of the boundaries of what is real, particularly when it comes to what it means to be human or our placement in the cosmos, whether we really are an exception in the universe, which, I think most of us watching here know that we're probably not an exception in the universe. But things like being able to discover new species, which I'd mentioned, being able to discover new things about existing species. So, for example, just about 15 minutes before I went on to record, I had a side door open and a back door open to let the breeze go through because it's quite warm in the house, or just to keep the house cool. And the airflow seemed to automatically shut the back door. And the dog was just minding her own business. She was doing her own thing. But when she heard the back door shut, she came and hid behind Mummy because obviously somebody else unexpected must be in the house because doors don't close themselves. Well, that demonstrates a kind of a reasoning aptitude that the dog has, where that she's been able to quickly ascertain that Mummy's here. She's the only one that ever opens and closes doors, so there must be someone else here. And being able to actually recognize the fact that our pets, for example, may have a different level of sentience than they've been given credit for officially. Anyone who has a dog or a cat knows that there's far more to an animal's way of thinking and consciousness than science gives credit, or the official word gives credit for. But it could be that there's discoveries that demonstrate that there's more to consciousness and more to the sentience and more to reality than we officially have known before. I think that's really exciting. And also the aspect of there being new species might even relate to there being an unexpected species, say coming from somewhere else, particularly if it's coupled with an awareness over the next 20 years that we're not alone, to be able to demonstrate that we're not alone, or that our place in the cosmos is not as significant as we thought it was. We might just be one in a trillion different inhabited planets. Wouldn't that be? It'd be nice to kind of go anonymous for a while and realize that we're really not as important as we thought we were. So kind of recalibrating our understanding of who we are, what we are, where we are placed in reality and existence, and what else might be around us as well. So that's really exciting. There are two other things that are taking place here, and one of them, let me just see if I can get these in the right order. So what I've just said to you is some of the things that could be explained or anticipated when Pluto, which is a very slow orbiting planet, 200 years it's taken, has finally entered into Aquarius. And it will be sitting here for 20 years. So unexpected, apparently, that in a book, an astrology book by a well-known author, because I did look her up, didn't even think it was worthwhile mentioning because it's probably never going to happen. Anywho, maybe not in her lifetime. I don't know. Anyway, but the other two things that are happening place, let's have a look here. We've got Uranus is going to be going into, transiting into Gemini. And I think that's happening next year, in July of next year. Is it July? Now, Uranus would have been sitting in Taurus, which is a really steady sign. Gemini is not such a steady sign. And so when it does shift into Gemini in around the middle of 2025, it's going to create a stimulation of energy where things are not quite as certain. And I actually think that that in itself sounds interesting. Now, I don't know enough because I'm still learning, but I don't know enough about the Uranus in Gemini energies, and I'd be really grateful to see your comments, anyone who has more experience than I do. But I just thought it was something that was likely to take us down the next step in a path, because here in 2024, this Pluto and Aquarius thing is a big deal. However, next year, in around about 6 or 7 months, the Uranus in Gemini starts to create some instability. And so Uranus is kind of a disruptor planet. And so a disruptor in a disruptor type of sign, I think, is kind of interesting. The next thing happens in 2026, and this is what really got my attention. This is a conjunct between Saturn and Neptune. And I think it's happening in February of 2026, or it's beginning to happen in February 2026. But I think it's around about Easter time, which is it April in 2026? But around about the Easter time, which is relevant to the Chris Bledsoe predictions by the Lady in White about something bad happening around Easter time of 2026. Well, this coincides with it by date. I'm just trying to find my note. Where is that? Okay. So I'm looking at astro.com for this, and it says that in July of 2025, the conjunction will be near exact, but it will be perfect at 0 degrees Aries on February the 20th. And then shortly thereafter, in April, I've lost that bit, but that's okay. I'm sure that astrologers who are watching will have more information than me, but somewhere in April, there's a magnification of something else. What it's likely to actually relate to here is that status quo's collapse, something powerful that was in control of the status quo is likely to collapse at that time. And there'll be a rise of a new set of heroes that will be charismatic, whether it be 1 or 1,000 or whatever, that will be charismatic, that will actually lead the people into something new. So when you think about all of this planetary activity, We start with this, oh, and I'm getting a chill. We start with this hoarding of information, manipulation of technology, increased awareness by more people, a blurring of the boundaries of who we are and where we're placed in reality and in the cosmos. And then we get this disruptor element happening within 6 or 7 months of that is going to be long-standing. And then we get another layer, which is the rise and fall of empires in a way. So it looks as though this energy is significant and this planetary shift is significant. So that was my perspective based on research into the phenomenon of Pluto moving into Aquarius for the first time in 200 years. It's kind of a big deal, and it has the potential to really shake things up, particularly with the conjunction taking place and also the movement of Uranus into Gemini as well. Now, let's take a look and see what the cards had to say about that very same phenomenon. Yesterday, I did a little discussion on Pluto in Aquarius based on just what I was able to ascertain from studying the planetary lineup. And today, I'm going to do a reading on it. So let's take a look. So just a little recap. I would suggest going back and taking a look at the first video, which is my summary of what to expect and what some of the clues might be based on a view of what tends to happen when Pluto, that has not entered into Aquarius for 200 years, suddenly does. And it did on the 19th or 20th of November, depending on which hemisphere you live in. I've been asked here to do a reading on this as well. And the request came from Pakamama, who says, please discuss Pluto in Aquarius energy. Okay, I'm going to. So, Pakamama, the way that I was able to ascertain from my research is that there are a number of different factors that are likely to take place. And that is a hoarding of information, an acceleration of information and technology, also powerful entities hoarding that information to gain power and control, increased authoritarianism or pushes for authoritarianism, increased espionage efforts, also more conflicts around the world, but also more domestic conflicts as well, potentially even attempted uprisings, the increase in authoritarian leadership and pushes for authoritarian tendencies, the suppression of information, but the growing awareness of people as well, and also the manipulation of science and technology. So things like doing things that might be unethical in science or technology in order to gain that power. Kind of like it looks like a desperate fight that's accelerating, to become supreme. So it's a struggle for power and supremacy. That kind of thing is what it looks like. It's building up slowly. There are other planetary lineups as well, but it looks as though, and also one of the really significant things is kind of a blurring of the boundaries of what's real and what's not, and also potentially discovering new species or that new life forms exist. And then the big dumping of information, whether it be new information or the reintroduction of old information, which could be things like discoveries of more ancient wisdoms, or a kind of a depositing of information from a new place, which could even be an alien life form or something that, comes from the heavens. Who knows? But it just sounded like it was really exciting. And Pluto has not been in Aquarius for 200 years. It's going to stay for 20. And so the energies would last until around 2044. So with that, let's do a reading and see what the cards have to say about Pluto in Aquarius. Now, I've got a lot of context, so hopefully I'll be able to see any signs, and I'm really keen on hearing viewpoint in the comments of anyone who's able to recognize things that I can't in the cards, because perhaps you've got more knowledge of astrology than I do. I have a feeling a lot of astrologers are really excited about this, and just because it's significant. When something comes along every 200 years, you're likely to only see it once in this lifetime. Let's have a look. Okay. So we have the signifier and the challenge card. Conscious thoughts. Subconscious thoughts. Now, where have we seen this card again and again and again? And it's still in context. Okay. The past. And then the short term, or an important aspect of the reading. I think it might be the short term, actually. So the signifier is the world in reverse, and it's challenged by the Knight of Cups. Look at the cups, cups, cups. I think that's relevant. The world in reverse is about a delay moving forward or an overdue birth. And I think the overdue birth is likely to be it. This is a long-awaited arrival. The overdue birth would be the 200 years it's taken for Pluto to do its complete transit and arrive back in Aquarius. The challenge here is the Knight of Cups, and the Knight of Cups is about romance and idealistic expectations, and it can be unrealistic from time to time as well. So this is probably a challenge to remain grounded in expectations, but also to link expectations to reality. So you can't just sit back, and this is the challenge. You can't just sit back and say, oh, everything's going to sort itself out. That would be unrealistic. You can have your romantic, idealistic viewpoint, but it will have to be backed up with something. And that is probably what's here. And so it means that you need to have something other than the cup suite represented in your truth. So sometimes when people rely, if they see a particular card, they look at the suite and they go, oh, it's all about love and intuition and spirituality, but they forget that that doesn't sit well by itself. You've also got 3 other suites. So they will have to, what this card is basically saying is an example of that. Be mindful that cups alone are not enough. We also have to draw from the other cards that may, or suites that are represented in the reading. And that's the reason why the potential for being unrealistic appears here. We can't live by cups alone. Okay, so we're going to pay special attention to the other suites that are represented in this reading, because we're going to listen to this guy. All right. So it looks as though we're overdue for something because it's been 200 years in the making, and it has romantic, idealistic expectations, which could be warranted, but the major challenge is not to be unrealistic. All right. So conscious thoughts, we've got the 2 of Cups in reverse. This is about a disconnect. This is a disconnect of that spirituality and love. This can be the division between us. These two are not, when the card is upright, it's about attraction, commitment, and love. Maybe they're kind of not so attracted to each other when the card's in reverse. This can be about division, or not being emotionally or spiritually connected to one another. I think that rings true probably for a lot of people who are watching right now. In the subconscious, we've got the Page of Wands. And the Page of Wands, have you noticed, is appearing a lot at the moment in really crucial positions. The message to America was that the Page of Wands is our biggest challenge. And then a few days later, I did another reading where it was about the environment in which we sit. I can't remember what reading that was, but I'm sure somebody will tell me. I did a reading a couple of days later, and it appeared in the environment in which we sit, which is a direct relationship to the challenge. This here is another layer of information about where it's going, where it's placed in accordance with Pluto and Aquarius. And that is that it's kind of the bigger picture. So this is our daily struggle, and this would be what sits beneath it, which is that the Page of Wands is about focusing in a way on something new and allowing your inspiration to guide you. So the desert is there to remind us that there's nothing relevant for us to worry about in this present moment. Instead, to focus our inspiration on the buds of inspiration. And so that's what the sky is doing, is he's kind of looking to see what else is out there. And you'll also notice he's looking upward into, this unknown realm. So I think that's really relevant. In the past, we've got the Page of Cups. This is about creative insight, arrival of a message, and there's an element of understanding your identity here. So, and introspection. So introspection, creative insight, and arrival of a message, that appears in the past. I have a feeling that this is about us believing that we understood who we were and what our placement was in a way, but I'll know more when the bottom cards come in. And then in the short term, we've got the Six of Pentacles, which is about giving and receiving support and charity. And it's generally according to he who holds the scales of justice. At the moment, we have a group of people that will be holding all the power very soon. And they do tend to be a very materialistic group. So I think this is about the status quo, and it could very well relate to the picking and choosing of who gets what. So this can relate to suppression towards, or oppression and suppression towards some, and generosity and support towards others. And so this is kind of like trying to manipulate the power structure so that you can enforce your own power and control, okay, in the short term. And it's very earthbound. So this could also be about doing what it takes to maintain the status quo by building up those that support the status quo and denying those that don't. And the status quo is a tangible thing that appears in the Pentacles. So let's keep going. Yeah, absolutely. The way we see ourselves, the way others see us, or the environment in which we sit. Very exciting, very exciting. Hopes and fears. Okay. And then the final answer. Okay, when I put this down, I had this reminder of something that came to me, the various different planetary lineups that become significant relating to Pluto and Aquarius are also the Uranus entering Gemini, which kind of destabilizes things a little. It makes it a little bit wobbly. And also the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that takes place and then kind of solidifies in early 2026, which could be about the fall of major powers and the rise of new heroes. It seems as though something's building up that's going to have almost like a humbling effect. And I do suspect that that's what's happening here. I'm going to need an extension for this card because this is uncanny, but I don't think it finishes the story just yet. So let me just keep going through this though. The way we see ourselves is the Nine of Wands, and this is about courage and resilience in the face of adversity. This is a clue about what to do with the positive energy and the positive light. It's about maintaining your strength, being strong, trusting in the fact that you have everything that you need inside you, basically. You have that courage and resilience. So we have everything that we need inside us, okay, despite the current disconnect from others. And I suspect, you'll see here, we've got influences here and here that are probably making it hard for us to recognize what our resilience is. They reward bad behavior, they deny good behavior, that kind of thing. And this is the status quo feeding itself so that it can maintain that material kind of thing. And it's going to continue in the short term. It's okay, darling. It's okay. Lolo's just having a bit of a grumble. Something's happened next door, I think. Okay. All right. So the way we're viewed by others or the environment in which this sits is justice in reverse, and I think it's the environment. Actually, you know what? It may even be the way that we're viewed. But if this is the view of humanity, then whatever it is that will ultimately transpire from this Pluto Aquarius energy is going to cast a very harsh judgment. And that's what's humbling right here. But you see how it sits beneath this fellow who's looking up, who has his inspiration forward. I think that it's a really important message for us not to be some happy-go-lucky drunkard who just ignores reality and kumbayas their way through life, because that's not realistic. You see, that's not realistic. Instead, it's about just drawing from your strength and recognizing that it's indefinite. There's an indefinite amount of strength. I have to scratch at the surface. I feel like I'm really close, and every single layer tells me more. But you see, one thing that's missing here is the sword suite. Apart from, this guy is holding a sword, which you can see here. And I think that's relevant because if you take a look at this fellow who's looking upward to the heaven for his inspiration, and then you have this Justice in Reverse card, which is where a harsh kind of karmic justice comes. Well, the karmic justice, the poetic justice, is holding a sword. Is that poetic justice information-based? Because the Pluto and Aquarius energy would indicate that there's going to be a major dumping of information on humanity. Our entire understanding of ourselves over the next 20 years is going to shift dramatically. And there is a possibility with the other bits of planetary lineup, the other influences, that all the predictions that something is coming and that there's going to be great hardships somewhere in the world, or even for the whole world, in early 2026. And then like a revolutionary element that happens throughout the year and an intervention almost and in late 2026. That intervention could be carrying information, and that could change everything. And remember, this poetic justice flips things. So anyone who thought they were in power here suddenly is not. Anyone who thought they had no power suddenly has power. And that's the reason why being resilient allows you to still be here with all of your faculties and all of your ability to maintain your understanding of where you sit in the world, to learn from it, to kind of thrive and grow from it, spiritually, emotionally, inspirationally. If you can maintain that, being in power is something to kind of look forward to in the future, because that's poetic. That flips everything. Now here, I have more context for this card now. This card in the past is about us kind of being, we know who we are, we know where we sit, we understand the rules, and we abide by the law, and we do all the things that, we're being good people, we're doing what we're supposed to do in the material world. And this is how we feel about it in the past. But here, you see, here we have this humbling element, because this is about, these guys all fight for their own beliefs. But if a power or an energy were to come in that was actually poetic and completely humbled this fight, then suddenly everybody would start agreeing. They wouldn't be fighting anymore because, quite frankly, they can't win. And so this is where there's negotiations and agreements made, and there's no arguing that takes place. It's kind of like everyone's just suddenly been shut up. and something much bigger has arrived. And so you may have those with the inner demons. Generally, it's probably these guys who are grumbling all their way down to the bottom, or may even be eliminated. I don't know. But you have this aspect here where agreements are reached suddenly. Oh, okay, now I get it. We don't have to fight anymore, that kind of thing. Now this card is the Devil in reverse. This is about sociopathic type of energy. And I'm aware of the fact that the prophecies and predictions, the credible ones, the ones that sort of have stood the test of time and have stood this kind of scrutiny, whether they be ancient ones or recent ones, they talk about the battle between the darkness and the light. This is the darkness. This is the sociopathic energy that sits beneath this material existence. I want to see what happens next. I think, let's just put the cards down. Okay, that's all I need. A rebirth. Judgment. This is about a rebirth. So basically, you've got forgiveness, rebirth, and finding your calling. And this would translate into an energy shift, into an entirely different type of existence. So this is a really exciting reading. And what it basically says, in a nutshell, is that the Pluto in Aquarius energy is the beginning with some of the other, I mean, when it comes to the other stuff, you know, the conjunction between Saturn and Neptune that happens in 2026 and the Uranus in Gemini transit as well. These are things that are only just kind of identified, but I don't know whether they're the only relevant ones. There may also be other relevant transits as well. And that's why I'm interested in hearing from people. However, the reading would indicate that from what I can see, this Pluto in Aquarius arrival is kind of like the beginning of something that's going to build and build and build to the point where we no longer, by the end of it, we're not going to have the same identity that we had before. And there won't be the same hierarchy as there was before. But there's a poetic justice that's in the environment that is going to stop the fighting. And the fighting, and the reason why they'll stop the fighting is because people will become humble. They will kind of suddenly be presented with something that makes whatever they were talking about before completely irrelevant. You know, I'm fighting for my rights or for my opinion or for power. And suddenly a big purple elephant falls out of the sky, you know, and you kind of go, what was I fighting about? You forgot everything that was so important to you a moment ago. And that's what I've been feeling, like something like that is coming in. I'm not the only one. A lot of people have been feeling it. We can't put our finger on it. But it's just so exciting. I don't know, it's just so exciting. And this looks like it might be part of that process. Pakamama, thank you so much for your question. It wasn't even on my radar until I saw your teeny weeny little comment. But now it's a great big deal in my world and I'm going to see if I can get more information. I'm really looking forward to your comments. So there you go. That was my tarot card reading. I did a 10 card reading for those who are listening on audio, for those who are watching on video, perhaps on KGRA or on my Facebook page, or if you've returned to YouTube, take a look at the two different perspectives side by side. You will see that I use a 10 card spread that uses standard definitions for my cards. I've been doing tarot readings for over 35 years. It's actually creeping up now where I'm not sure if I should say 35 years or whether I should say close to 4 decades, you know, but it's been a very long time. And I always use a standard set of definitions for the cards, and then I kind of stretch them out in relation to context in order to find out what the language is that is being portrayed to me about a particular subject. And the reason why I'm mentioning it to you in such detail is because I've just had my book published on this very subject of tarot. My new book, which should appear somewhere over here around about now, is called Tarot Well Done, and it is a comprehensive instruction book, reference book, and guide to reading tarot. I believe that a person with this book as their sole reference to learn can go from being a novice to a proficient tarot card reader, keeping in mind not only the acquisition of knowledge, but putting it into the context of where this language of tarot came from, the theologies, the insight from religions and ancient wisdoms and philosophy, and also some of the other types of influences, like, for example, astrology, numerology, and putting it all together. Alchemy, all kinds of things, and putting it all together along with the beautiful artistry by Pamela Coleman Smith to create an iconic set of cards, which are the Rider-Waite tarot cards. And those are the cards that I've been using every single day for somewhere between 35 and 40 years. Okay, so my book has been published. I'm really excited. This has been a labor of love. It's taken me over a year and a half, probably closer to 2 years to write this book. And it comes from the heart. I would say that I'm pretty proud of it, actually, and I really hope that you enjoy this book as well. So I'd love to hear what you have to say. I have a link to the book in Amazon, and once again, it's called Tarot Well Done by me, Ellie, but born with the name Elena Olympia Collins. I've decided that's going to be my author's name, or my pen name. Why not go back to basics? Go back to my roots. But you know what? You can still call me Ellie. So yes, I'm Ellie, and you can find me at Ellie Dreams Down Under on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who is listening on one of KGRA's broadcasting platforms. If you'd like to become a member of the KGRA viewership family and watch your favorite hosts do their shows while you chat with like-minded watchers, experiencers, spiritualists, and weirdos like me, then just go to live.kgradb.com and put in promo code Ellie to get 30% off your subscription. That's it for today. Until next time.